you are doing well, happy and safe. Shall we move on to the third block? Yes. Today we will discuss the last chapter of Unit 3, which is on page number 101. Okay, so please open your textbook, take page number 101. There we have a poem titled STAMMER, penned by one of the finest of the poets writing in Malayalam, SACHIDANANDAN. Poetry is like breathing. It is a way in which I respond to myself, to nature and to the world around, says our poet. SACHIDANANDAN, who is a prolific Indian poet and critic writing in Malayalam and English, started his business of writing when modernism had gripped Kerala's literature. He is said to be among the first poets to experiment with introducing prose into their poetic method in Malayalam. Or he is known as the pioneer of modern poetry in Malayalam. He is a postmodern poet and our poem STAMMER falls under postmodern poetry, having the qualities of a postmodern poem. And it is so much prose-like than a poem. Okay. Now SACHIDANANDAN, he is a bilingual critic, a columnist, editor, essayist, a playwright, professor of English, the former secretary of Kendra Sahitya Academy, and a brilliant translator. He is also a recipient of countless awards. He was even shortlisted for the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2011 and was the Nobel laureate of the 2019 Tata Literature Live Festival. And as a conscious decision, SACHIDANANDAN has been writing poetry solely in Malayalam. He writes poems only in Malayalam. But of course he is a good translator. Okay. So when it comes to the translation of his own works, he only picks those pieces which are translatable. He's a good translator. Okay. And actually our poem STAMMER was originally written in Malayalam with the title Vikk, and the poet himself translated the poem to English and named it STAMMER. Originally this poem was written in Malayalam with the title Vikk, and he has translated the poem to English with the title STAMMER. Okay. So STAMMER means, the Malayalam equivalent of STAMMER is Vikk. Okay, what do you think about the word STAMMER? What is your notion about the word STAMMER? Is it a disability, a speaking disorder, or a defect, or a genetic disorder? You may just think about that. Okay. Again, let's come back to our poet. SACHIDANANDAN has authored more than 60 books, including 25 collections of poetry. His collections have appeared in more than 20 different languages, including Indian languages and European languages. Sachidanandan is a great humanitarian and a socially committed poet. His articles, lectures and poems are so much encouraging, motivational, inspiring and thought-provoking. And this poem STAMMER is also such a kind of an encouraging and a thought-provoking poem on the theme STAMMER. The theme dealt in the poem is STAMMER. STAMMER becomes the central theme of the poem. And he has given a different meaning to the word stammer in the poem. He is going to redefine the word stammer. Okay. See, now let's listen to what the poet has to say about a poet's mission. What is the mission of a poet? He says, a poet needs to take sides. Sachidanandan says, a poet needs to take sides. It doesn't mean I am a member of a political party, but in a broader, deeper human sense, I am with those who suffer injustice, exploitation of any kind, who are impoverished and marginalized in society. I am with those who suffer injustice, exploitation. I am with the marginalized, poor, underprivileged people. And that is an inevitable part of a poet's mission. To him, poetry is not just a combinatorial game. It's not a play of words, a game with words. Poetry, it rises up from the ocean of unsayable, tries to say what it cannot say, to name the nameless, and to give voice to the voiceless. Poetry gives voice to the voiceless. It's a voice of the voiceless. That is what is happening in this poem Stammer too. Here the poet becomes the voice of the voiceless. He behaves like the spokesperson of the marginalized. He becomes the spokesperson of the underprivileged. He becomes the spokesperson of our fellow beings who are unfairly sidelined because of just being different from us and not inferior. As they are different from us, they are sidelined, not that they are inferior to us. So here he speaks for them. He becomes the voice of the underprivileged and marginalized. He is going to challenge the general notion on stammer. Stammer, we think the literal meaning of stammer is that it is a speaking disorder. No. It is a disability. It's not the disability. It's the ability of that person. And the poet is trying to establish his fresh perspective that there is no such thing as disability, but just the beautiful diversity of abilities. There is no such thing as disability, but just the beautiful diversity of abilities. All are equal before God. So before going deep into the poem, let's listen to our poem Stammer, shall we? I will read the English poem Stammer and also the Malayalam poem titled Wick. You can open your textbook. Stammer. Stammer is no handicap. It is a mode of speech. Stammer is a silence that falls between the word and its meaning, just as lameness is a silence that falls between the word and the deed. Did stammer precede language or succeed it? Is it only a dialect or a language itself? These questions make the linguist stammer. Each time we stammer, we are offering a sacrifice to the God of meanings. When a whole people stammer, stammer becomes their mother tongue, just as it is with us now. God too must have stammered when He created man. That is why all the words of man carry different meanings. That is why everything he utters, from his prayers to his commands, stammers like poetry. Okay, so here is the Malayalam poem, Vick. Actually, our poet stammer is the translation of the poem Vick. വിക്ക് വൈകല്യമല്ല, ഒരു സംസാര രീതിയാണ്. വാക്കിനും അർത്ഥത്തിനും ഇടയ്ക്ക് വരുന്ന ചില മൗനങ്ങളെയാണ് നാം വിക്ക് എന്ന് വിളിക്കുന്നത്. വാക്കിനും പ്രവൃത്തിക്കും ഇടയ്ക്കുള്ള മൗനങ്ങളെ മുടന്ത് എന്ന് വിളിക്കുന്ന പോലെ തന്നെ. ഭാഷയ്ക്ക് മുമ്പാണോ വിക്കുണ്ടായത് അതോ ഭാഷയ്ക്ക് ശേഷമോ? ഭാഷയുടെ ഒരു പ്രാദേശിക വ്യതിയാനമാണോ വിക്ക്, അതോ സ്വയം ഒരു ഭാഷയോ? ഈ ചോദ്യങ്ങൾക്ക് മുൻപിൽ ഭാഷാ ശാസ്ത്രജ്ഞർ വിക്കുന്നു. ഓരോ കുറി വിൽക്കുമ്പോഴും നാം അർത്ഥങ്ങളുടെ ദൈവത്തിന് ഒരു ബലി നൽകുകയാണ്. ഒരു ജനത ഒന്നിച്ചു വിൽക്കുമ്പോൾ അവരുടെ മാതൃഭാഷ വിക്കാകുന്നു. ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മുടേത് എന്ന പോലെ. മനുഷ്യനെ സൃഷ്ടിച്ചപ്പോൾ ദൈവവും വിക്കിയിരിക്കണം. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് മനുഷ്യരുടെ എല്ലാ വാക്കുകളും ദുരൂഹമായത്. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് മനുഷ്യരുടെ പ്രാർത്ഥനകൾ മുതൽ കൽപ്പനകൾ വരെ എല്ലാം വിക്കുന്നത്, കവിതയെ പോലെ. Okay, so now we read the poem and also the original Malayalam version of STAMMER. See, I have already said that this is a modern poem, and our poet is an advocate of oppressed minorities and marginalized classes. So please do remember these two things. That this is a modern poem. Okay. So to read a modern poem, you have to keep in mind certain things. The reading of a modern poem requires the power to analyze the meaning from different perspectives. To get closer to the soul of the poem, we should consider the intended and interpreted meaning. To come closer to the soul of the poem, both intended or the surface meaning and the interpreted or inner meanings are to be found out. Which means a single poem may have plenty of hidden assumptions and contradictions. And of course, you know that while we read a poem, we have to read between lines. It is to be read between lines, isn't it? And it is the reader who fills the gaps with his meanings. There are lots of gaps inside the poem. It's the reader's silence is inside the poem. It's the reader who fills them with his own meanings. And according to postmodern theory, The reader has got the complete right to deconstruct a poem in his own way. He can deconstruct, he can postmortem the poem and give his own meanings. And the meaning given by the reader is the meaning of the poem. Death of the author and birth of the reader happens there. Death of the author and birth of the reader. The meaning given by the reader is the meaning of the poem. Or, see, with each reader meaning varies according to his perception. Which means that each reader experiences a poem, experiences a text subjectively, contextually. According to his outlook, according to his perception, he may interpret that poem. And therefore, there is a possibility to have multiple meanings. A single poem may have multiple meanings. So same is the case with our poem too. This is a modern poem and it's up to us, isn't it? We will give meaning to the poem, and the meaning given by the reader is the meaning of the poem. This poem too has got plenty of hidden assumptions, contradictions and meanings. So let's try to comprehend the poem. The things what I have just said now is so much about our poem itself because the poet has equated stammer to that of poetry itself. Poet says that stammer is like poetry, or poetry is equal to stammer. Okay, don't forget that. We will come to that later. And now let's think about the theme of the poem. Of course, the central theme of the poem is stammer itself. But it's much beyond that. Okay. And the concept or the idea conveyed in the poem is difference in perspectives. Difference in perspectives. See, we can interpret the same thing in different ways. As we are different, we see things in different perspectives. See, look at this glass. You could see a glass with water, isn't it? Either I could say that this glass is half filled, or this is half empty. Which is correct? Half filled or half empty? Yes, it varies, isn't it? So we can either be positive or negative. As we are unique, we are different, we can have different interpretations. And this is actually one of the main concept or idea conveyed through this poem. You may think about the word stammer. What is the literal meaning of the word stammer? Stammer means to speak haltingly with a tendency to repeat the same sound or syllable. To speak with pauses, isn't it? A speaking defect. To speak haltingly with a tendency to repeat the same sound or syllable. Do you get me? Yes. Do you get me? So you are waiting for me to complete the meaning, isn't it? There are plenty of pauses in between my word and the meaning, isn't it? So stammer means to speak haltingly. But here, and to us, it is a speaking defect, a disorder, a speech defect, isn't it? But here the poet is going to change the meaning of the word stammer. He redefines the word stammer. He is going to dispel the general notion that it is a handicap. It is not a handicap, it's not a disability. The poet presents a different perspective of the word stammer, which is commonly considered as a speaking disorder. He's going to change the meaning of the word stammer. He has dealt it with a different perspective, in a different perspective. Until recently, art, especially cinema, presented itself to be a platform quite unfair when it comes to the depiction of infirmities, both physical and mental. The instance of Malayalam cinema, especially we have a series of Malayalam cinema that cashes in on the differentially abled characters by making them buds of ridicule. We have plenty of Malayalam cinemas where differentially abled characters become comic figures. And all Malayalis laugh at them. Example, Kunnikunan, the hunchback who aspires to win the hand of a beautiful maiden. Sound Thoma, the cleft-lipped, desperate in his love reciprocated. Until recently, art, especially cinema, presented itself to be a platform quite unfair when it comes to the depiction of infirmities, both physical and mental. The instance of Malayalam cinema, especially we have a series of Malayalam cinema that cashes in on the differentially abled characters by making them buds of ridicule. We have plenty of Malayalam cinemas where differentially abled characters become comic figures. And all Malayalis laugh at them. Example, Kunnikunan, the hunchback who aspires to win the hand of a beautiful maiden. Sound Thoma, the cleft-lipped, desperate in his love reciprocated. Again we have more movies like Tilakam, where we have the person who is a victim of temporary memory loss and he becomes the laughing stock of the entire village. And the whole audience, all of us, laughed at these movies, laughed at them, isn't it? Huh? We lavishly laughed at all these comic extravaganza. And equally important at this point is a group of words, a list of words, words of abuse, borrowed from the realm of disabilities. We have a list of words of abuse borrowed from the world of disabilities. Lots of words related to disabilities. We have a list with us. For example, deaf ears, lame excuse, moron, mad, damn, and so on. Which means we need to have a change in our attitude, isn't it? And this happens to be the context of our poem, Stammer. SACHIDANANDAN looks at this infirmity. Stammer to us is an infirmity, disability. He looks at stammer from an altogether new angle. And that proves to be encouraging, motivational and thought-provoking. In a language, here in the poem, he has used simple, plain language. In a language quite plain and unadorned, he begins the new discourse. He begins the new discourse and states that stammer is no handicap, it is a mode of speech. Stammer is no handicap, it is a mode of speech. The statement is emphatic and prose-like. See the first stanza, the first 2 lines. It appears to be prose, like a prosa. It's written in the form of a statement. And it is forceful and emphatic. Very clearly he states that it is not a handicap, just a mode of speech. And that emphasis is deliberate. It's written in the form of a statement, and that is deliberately written. Okay. So the poet wants to prove that stammer is not a defect, a disability, but it is just an alternative ability of the person. He is trying to establish his fresh perspective that there is no such thing as disability, but just the diversity of abilities. Stammer is not a defect, but it is yet another language, spoken by a selected few who are to be understood and respected. Spoken by that selected few, and we have to respect them. So he clearly says that it is not a handicap or defect, but it's an alternative ability of the person. He clearly states that stammer cannot be labeled as a handicap, but instead the poet labeled it as a mode of speech. The second stanza. Stammer is the silence that falls between word and its meaning, just as lameness is a silence that falls between word and the deed. See, here in the second stanza, poet relates stammering to the world of imperfections. In today's world, wherein everyone is running after perfection, stammer makes the reader understand the importance of embracing one's own imperfections, importance of embracing one's own flaws, accepting our own weaknesses. So here in this stanza, you could see that the poet has used a figure of speech, and that is simile. He has compared stammer to that of lameness. Of course, you know what is stammer. And the definition given here is, stammer is a silence that falls between word and its meaning. So stammer is that inevitable pause that is sandwiched between word and its meaning, isn't it? It is a silence meaning pause. Between word and its meaning. Of course, I have said stammer, isn't it? Repeating the same syllable, the same sound, to speak haltingly, to speak with pauses. So when the speaker is unable to convey his ideas properly, he stammers. When the teacher finds it difficult to convey things properly to students, she stammers. But it's not a negative action. It's not negative because it's good that the speaker stammers. Only when the speaker stammers, the listener may get a chance to make his own contributions. Only then the listener gets a chance to think and to give his own meanings, to make his own contributions to that. So it's good that the speaker stammers. So what is stammer? Stammer is a silence that pauses between word and its meaning. Before conveying the meaning, the speaker stammers. The pause, silence between word and its meaning, and that is what is stammer. And the poet has equated stammer to that of lameness. What is lameness? Lameness is difficulty in walking. Mudanda. So stammer is equal to lameness. Weak. Stammer means weak, isn't it? It's equal to mudanda. How come stammer becomes lameness? How can we equate stammer to lameness? And what is the definition given here by the poet? He says that lameness is a silence that falls between word and deed. Lameness is that silence, that pause between, that gap between word and deed. Here the poet is going to prove that we are very, very good stammerers. all of us are good at stammering. Why? See, I will give a simple example. Just imagine your class teacher phoned you just to get the feedback of her online classes and all. She phoned you. Hello Akshay, how are you? Hello Arun, how are you? Ma'am, yes, doing well ma'am. Are you happy with your family? Yes, of course, great ma'am. But I miss you ma'am. Okay, and what about your online classes? Are you regularly attending your classes? Oh, why not? Of course ma'am. And so much of regular, isn't it? Of course, sure ma'am. And what about your notes? Up to date? Yes ma'am. Actually, and what is the topic that we discussed yesterday? What is the topic that we discussed yesterday in yesterday's class? Actually starts to stammer. Ma'am, yesterday, it was heavily raining. And see, we don't have signal. There were some issues regarding my mobile data, and so I couldn't attend yesterday's class. Sorry. He starts stammering. What about day before yesterday and the classes? And what's the topic that we discussed day before yesterday? He starts giving lame excuses. So all of us are very good at giving lame excuses. When there is a big gap, disparity between my word and my deed, we start giving lame excuses. All of us are very good at that. So the poet has beautifully said that, isn't it? Stammer is like lameness. Stammer is equal to lameness. And what is lameness? Lameness here meaning lame excuses. Lameness is a silence that falls between word and deed. When there is a big gap, a big difference between my word and my deed, I affect lameness. And we are very good at affecting lameness. And when we affect lameness, while we are giving lame excuses, we stammer. So all of us are great stammerers, isn't it? So stammer is thus equated to lameness. And I think you may have heard of a famous political Indian communist leader, E.M.S. Namboodiripadu. And he is well known for his stammering. Once, he was quipped by a journalist. A journalist, purposefully to belittle him, questioned him. He asked whether he stammers every time. That was a question asked. Whether he stammers every time. And EMS replied saying, no, I stammer only when I speak. I stammer only when I speak. But what about us? We stammer in our action. Stammering in speech here is compared to lameness. Stammering in action. That is what is lameness. Metaphorically, stammer and lameness refer to all kinds of our laziness, hesitation, and reluctance to respond to social issues and problems in the society. We often neglect our civic duties and sympathy towards our fellow beings. We are not ready to help the needy and the poor people of the society. We are not ready to react or respond or raise our voice for the poor ones. And that is also compared to stammering. The third stanza. Did stammer precede language or succeed it? Is it only a dialect or a language itself? These questions make the linguist stammer. So here let's consider these two words. Dialect and the word linguist. What is the meaning of dialect? Dialect is actually the regional variations of the same language. Dialect is regional variations of the same language. Okay, for example, in Malayalam, we may have various dialects like Thrissur dialect, Alapi dialect, Trivandrum dialect. regional variations of same language is called as a dialect. Variations of language, the same language. Okay. Now, who are linguists? Linguists is equal to language experts. People who study the science of language or language scientists are called as linguists, language experts. So here in the poem, the poet wonders whether stammer existed before language or it came after it. He wonders whether stammer came before language or after it. And he is asking these questions purposefully, just to prove that stammer is also a kind of a language. Stammer is just another form of language. It is equally important to language. It is another language. And if you are asking these questions to linguists, they are confused. Linguists may stammer. These questions may confuse the linguists. So speaking disorders within single quotes, okay, are to be viewed as different dialects. Speaking disorders are to be viewed as different dialects or different languages themselves. And this view may confuse the language experts. This view may confuse the linguists who are only focused on standard tongues. Linguists are only focused on standard language. They are language experts. They are focused only on languages, standard languages. And they are confused. If you are asking these questions, can we call stammer as a dialect? Or is it a language? They are confused and they stammer. So if linguists stammer, then why can't we stammer? So the poem in its own unique way calls for a revision of standards. The poem calls for a revision of standards. Fourth stanza. Each time we stammer, we are offering a sacrifice to the god of meanings. When whole people stammer, stammer becomes their mother tongue, just as it is with us now. So your poet considers stammer as a sacrifice to the god of meanings. Like a priest who makes sacrifice to God. Here, when we stammer, we are making a sacrifice to language. God of meanings here means language. Or it could be those linguists, those demigods or linguists who favor meaningful, stammer-free conversations alone. So when the speaker stammers, unknowingly, he is making a sacrifice to the god of meanings by giving a different utterance of it. By giving a different utterance of it, unknowingly he is giving a sacrifice to the god of meanings. By giving a different meaning to it, he is giving a sacrifice. Or when the speaker stammers, the listener gets an opportunity to make his own contributions. So thereby, he is giving an offering to the god of meanings. He is giving the listener an opportunity to give his own meanings, to make his own contributions, and that could be considered as an offering to language. Okay. And when whole people stammer, stammer becomes their mother tongue. So when all people stammer, it is accepted by the society. It becomes a common universal phenomenon, and it can be even considered as the mother tongue of that society. When all people stammer becomes the mother tongue of the society. It becomes a common universal phenomenon, just as it is with us now. And that is what is happening in the society now. All are good stammers. We are very good at affecting lameness. We are very good at giving lame excuses. We are not ready to react. We are not ready to respond. We are not ready to raise our voice. We are not ready to help the needy and the poor people. The last stanza of the poem. God too must have stammered when he created man. That is why all the words of man carry different meanings. That is why everything he utters, from his prayers to his commands, stammers like poetry. The concluding stanza of the poem centers on the hypothesis that God too must have stammered during the moments of creation, and that finally led to the attribution of different meanings to different words. Here, poet features God not as a supernatural being, but God is here presented as a common human being prone to all human frailties. So thus, God's stammering during creation can be considered as a reason behind the mystery of language, its diversity, its status as a vehicle of multiple meanings. Or as God stammered at the time of creation, so say the last 3 lines, that is why everything he utters, from his prayers to his commands, stammers like poetry. See, it is a fact that every single instance of human speech, that comes directly from heart is stammer ridden, is full of stammer. There is a renowned quote: when heart is full, words are few. Furthermore, it is a universal human characteristic to fumble, stutter, and falter while expressing the most intense of his emotions. For example, a love proposal. While we are expressing the most intense of our emotions, we stammer. Prayer, commands, all these are expression of our intense emotions, isn't it? Therefore, we stammer. And also, poet says stammers like poetry. He has equated stammer to that of poetry. Real poetry to stammers. Here you will have to consider this line also. The poet has defined stammer as a silence that falls between word and its meaning, isn't it? Stammer is a silence, that pause, that gap, which is sandwiched between word and its meaning, and that is what poetry is. Poetry, to get the meaning of a poem, you will have to read between lines. There are lots of gaps inside a poem. It's the reader who fills the gap by giving his own meanings. Death of the author and birth of the reader happens in the poem. It's the reader who gives meaning to the poem. The meaning given by the reader is the meaning of the poem. So therefore, poetry can be equated to stammer because it's a silence that is sandwiched between word and its meaning. Meaning is given by the reader. Okay, I hope the poem is clear to you. So with such profusion of points, the poet succeeds in making his stand clear, as well as inspiring his readers to change their narrow perspective regarding those of our fellow beings who are unfairly sidelined because of their being just different from us and not inferior. Undeniably, the poem is postmodern in spirit, in its professed concern for the underprivileged. Structure-wise, stammer seems to be loose knit, written in simple, plain language, comprising of 6 stanzas of irregular length. So I hope the poem is clear to you. And before concluding the class, let's once again recollect the words of SACHIDANANDAN on poetry. According to him, Poetry rises up from the ocean of unsayable, tries to say what it cannot say, to name the nameless, and to give voice to the voiceless. Okay, thank you, my dear children.